Also, we'll be recording this, so be sending out the slides and also the recording later in case you want to listen to it over again, and also for the people who might have missed today. Hi, Sean. Glad to have you here. Okay, I'm gonna kick off now. Just if you come back by the chat, can everybody hear me? Can everybody see the PowerPoint slide? If you can just confirm that, that'd be great. Yes, everything is okay? Good, so technology is working today. Okay, so what I like to do today is share with you some ideas about leading change. I'm not going to cover, the basic leadership skills that you really need to have. Some of the key things I covered maybe on some of the other master classes, like, you have to create the clarity, you have to get people who can make decisions, you have to drive collaboration and other things. What I wanted to cover today are things that I found unique to driving change that will really help you to do it in a much better way. So just a brief introduction of where this came from. I started driving change in my mid-20s when I started leading enterprise system implementations across the world. So I did it in big bang implementation. So you train everybody up, you flip a switch, you convert all the data on the weekend, and Monday morning, the whole company is doing something different because we changed every single process. At that time, I started out doing that. The first one I did was in Egypt. Then I did it in Netherlands. And then the next one was in Japan. So I did it in 3 different countries and 3 different subsidiaries. And the one in Japan was probably the most complex with multiple locations and multiple warehouses, et cetera. And then later in my career, I led international operations and also participated in business model changes. So I kind of driven change from the bottom all the way to the top area. So things I'm going to share with you are things in terms of driving change, particularly, complex change, but you can apply it to almost any situations that you have. Okay. So what I'm going to do is go through and I'll share some things with you. I might ask you to come back via the chat for some things. And also then I'll open it up for questions. And so we'll open it up for people for you to ask questions as we go. The first thing I wanted to share with you is when you're driving change, you need people to follow your direction and where you want to go. You got 3 reasons why people follow you. They follow you for you. I mean, you're like you're their role model, or they like who you are, they like what you believe in, and so forth. So they follow you. Second reason they follow you is that they're really agreeing with what you want to achieve. They want to achieve the same thing, so they're going to support you if you're driving a change that way. So they're following you for that. And the last one is they're following you because you're against something. You're fighting something. You're trying to make a change. You're going against the norm maybe or whatever, but they're willing to do that. So I want to go through just these because who you pick and how you drive change and so forth is really critical this way. So, if someone is following you for you, yeah, they're going to be very supportive of you. They're going to really help you along, but also they're going to want a lot of time from you because they're following you because they want to learn from you. If you don't give them that time, they're not going to be very happy. So while they can be very good, they can also be too dependent on you. So you have to be very, very careful. There's a story of one leader I heard where the person who came to work for him, and because of him, and then he eventually left because he didn't have the appropriate time. So be careful of this one. When people are following you for you, be careful that they're going to want that extra time, or they're going that time with you. They're not going to be as independent as the other people there as well. Okay. So keep that in mind. The second one is in the third one, they're following you because of what you want to achieve, and they're following you because of what you're against. Think about it this way. Once you achieve what you want to do, and once you fight and you've succeeded what you're against, they're not going to necessarily want to stay with you unless you're keeping them, you know, with opportunities and growing. They could be gone too. So once they achieved it, once they fought it and against it, they're off to the next fight, or they're off to the next thing they want to achieve. But they are very, very powerful because they are emotionally behind the cause you're having. They're not necessarily just emotionally behind you. So think about, you know, when you pick people for your team, why are they following you? And you want the people, you know, if you have that emotional connection to what you're fighting for or what you're fighting against, that's very, very powerful. Now, following you for you is powerful, but be careful of the personalities and so forth in person, because they might want more time from you than you have the time to give them that way too. So they could be more dependent on you. The ones that want to achieve and are fighting it, they could be a lot more, how would you say, they could be a lot more independent. Okay, so keep that in mind. Let me ask you a question for the people on the call. Do you have people that are following you for you? What do you think? As a leader, do you have people that are just following you because of who you are? So
Yes.
number you say yes, yeah. So, you know, just be careful of those things, but also, you know, be cognizant of why they're following you, and because change is really about people. Okay. Now, the second thing I want to share with you is the keys that I found in driving change. In fact, you know, I went back and reflected on all the experiences I had at driving change, because I had to lead a course on, you know, driving projects and driving change. And I was wondering, what were the really keys for me? And the three keys that I'm going to cover today: first, it's people; second, it's plans; and third, it's politics. Okay, so just a brief introduction. We'll go into all the details on each of those. But first is people. You know, if you're serious about the change, you put your best people on the change. You just don't put whoever's available. The minute you put who's ever available on the change, you just send a signal to everyone that this is not a priority. Okay. And, you know, yeah, does it hurt pulling people off certain operational duties or other things and so forth? Yes. But, you know, you're always going to have to put your best people there, or instantly people think, hey, this is not important. Okay. So, you know, think about that, and think about how you engineer the right backups, or think about how you free people up when you have to anticipate changes you're going to have to make and things you're going to have to drive. But first thing, everything worked with me when I had the right people there, because people were serious. This change is serious. The second thing is plans. Plans is interesting, and I'll share more detail later, but Eisenhower said it very important. He said, plans are useless, but he said the planning process to create it is indispensable. In other words, you know, unless you create a plan, it never forces you to think through the change you have to make. And therefore, you won't be able to explain it to others. And if you can't explain it or answer people's questions, people think, you know, you're not really on top of things, and you're not going to be able to make this happen. So I found that creating a plan is very important. The plan itself is going to be out of date the minute you finish it. But the part of creating that plan is going to be very, very useful. And the third thing is politics. There's politics in everything. Politics is basically creating and maintaining very strong business relationships that help you to make things happen. And if you think about it, you have politics in your private life too, and your families and friends and everything like that. You know, they always say that if you want to understand your politics in your family and friends, try to create a seating chart at your wedding reception. I'll tell you, then you know the politics that are there. Okay, so first thing is people. The best people signals you're serious. Plans that force you to think it through, to really be able to explain it and answer questions about it. And third, politics. In other words, building the strong relationships that enable you to make the change. Okay, so let's delve into those three here now. So the first one is the right people. Now, this is a very simple grid, and I've used this quite often, but performance is on the left side, behavior is on the bottom. Performance means they deliver to commitments. Behavior means that they live the culture, and they're good working with others in teamwork. So your best people, the people you pick for the leaders of this change and so forth, is in your top right box. Okay, those are people good in performance and they're good in behavior. Now, the people on the left top box, they're good in performance, but they could be a disaster in behavior. In other words, they're kind of that manipulator box. You better align them with a strong leader, or they go off and do their own thing, and they destroy your pace on the change and a lot of other things. The people in the right box is the people that, they're probably not as strong in performing, good behavior, maybe a good resource player, whatever. You give that person, those people to a part of the project that needs resources. But the bottom left, whatever you do, you don't let them steal your time. Okay. I always said that as a leader, you should work on the green box and the red box, because the green box is driving your success and the red box is slowing it. And so, you want to basically make those two boxes uncomfortable. The green box, you want to keep stretching them to use their potential. And the red box, you want to make them uncomfortable so that they leave. Okay. And then, the black boxes are really led by the people in the green. And your job as a leader is to make that green box as successful as they can be, to remove obstacles for them, but you pick the best people there. And let me just say one thing. Your best people aren't always your line people. All right, so you might not have people in supervisor positions who would be the best to drive this. So you should really reach into the organization and pick the best people you can to drive these different projects. And you can always, find a way to keep your line people in line and those things, but it's so important. In fact, if you have a team, a very good exercise for you to do is to map your people on this grid and map in initials and put the initials in the different places on the grid. And you start to see interesting things. The most dangerous issue you have is when you have a person who's up in the far upper right, but they're reporting to someone who is lower into the center than they are. For sure, they are not learning from that person. Okay, so you really want to keep in mind where you resource your people, and really think strategically about how you resource these teams, and just don't let it up to your project leaders. Really have good discussions about how they're resourcing the teams, and to make the strongest combination there. Okay, so keep in mind that right people. Another thing about the right people is the right people you want to do is, especially in that green box we just talked about, is that you want to challenge them to use their potential. Because when you're driving change, it's not easy. There's always going to be difficult things around it. There's always conflict around it. There's always some politics. There's all kinds of things that are there. People will try to avoid that conflict unless they're getting something in return. So if you frame the change for those green people as that you're going to be able to use more of your potential, you're going to be able to see how to use it more, you're going to learn skills that will use more of your potential this way. And, in many ways, it puts them opportunities for bigger roles in the future. They will take on the very difficult jobs and they'll say yes, because they're going to grow 10 times faster because of leading that particular change. It's very interesting, if you delegate something very difficult to your people to do and you never link it to their potential, they view it as you're dumping on me. So that looks like bad. But if you link something to their potential, Now they're saying, yes, I'm going to be able to showcase how good I am, and I'm going to take on these challenges because it's going to enable me to be even stronger in the future. Okay, so keep in mind this in terms of linking a change you want and link it to someone's potential so they feel more motivated to take on the difficulties and the challenges in terms of what those changes will address. Now, the other thing you want to think about when you're picking people is you got to pick O people. It's very interesting. Let me ask you this question. Uncertainty here, uncertainty and complexity. If I were to ask you, where is today's world with respect to uncertainty and complexity? Is it lower left or is it upper right? So if you come back via the chat function, today's world, lower left or upper right? What do you think? Yeah, way upper right, probably off this page and everything. And what I found is this: it's very interesting, and I learned this later in my life, and I wish I learned this earlier. But you think about it, the world was very simpler much years ago, before we had all this globalization and everything, and before we have this crisis and the virus crisis. When the world was simple, there was perfect answer to things. You could find a good answer. The world is way up in the right now. There's only options, right? And if you don't execute this option today, it might not be an option tomorrow. And I found that there's two types of people too. There's some people who are always searching for the perfect answer, and they can't find it. So they come to you as the boss to get the answer, or they're just sitting doing nothing for a while. And there's other people who say, hey, there is no perfect answers. There's only options. It's up to me to choose the option and keep going forward. So you need people who are O people, options people, thinking options with good business judgment and can make quick decisions, right? So think about this. When you've been leading projects, if you have an A as a project leader, how is your life? What do you think? Do you think your life is easy or hard if you have a leader below you who's an A? Just type in the chat. Is it going to be easy or hard if you have a leader who's an A type of mindset and person? Eliza is a disaster, time consuming. It's gonna be nuts. All right, because they're not going to find the answer on their own, and they're always going to be coming to you. It's going to be a nightmare. So keep in mind this. You got to choose O type of people for leading change. Whenever you have someone leading anything who's an A, it's always going to be time consuming. It's going to be too slow because they're not going to be able to find that perfect answer on their own. And let's say they do find the perfect answer, they're always going to come to you to confirm if they have it correct. So keep in mind that. So in people, when you think about it, let me see if I can go back here a second. People, focus on your best people in there to lead the projects. Link the project and lead the change and see how and show them how they're going to use the potential, because then they'll fight through all the difficulties. And pick O people for your project leaders. Whenever you have an A who's looking for those perfect answers, you are going to be in trouble, and so forth. Look at it this way. Anytime you have an A as a project leader, you are losing personal life. Okay, A as a project leader equals losing personal life. Okay, so you really want to hire O type of people, grow them, because they're the leaders for your change projects. Okay, let me just take a quick one. Any questions on what we covered so far? Anybody have any questions? No? Okay, so I'll reserve some more time at the end. Now, the next thing is you need a plan. You need to work on a project plan. Now, the project plan becomes sort of a focus for having the right discussions about what has to happen, of course, but the real power of that is it forces you to think it through. And the key is involve the people as you can in creating the plan. I'll actually have a slide that I used in the multiplying your influence session where you need to involve them. So the more you involve those key people, and the reason that project plan is in green, because you need the people in that green box to help you with the project plan. So not even the project leaders, but people down in the organization who are your role models, involve them in creating the project plan. Because then if they're involved, they'll be able to answer people's questions. And whenever someone asks a question about the project and the change you're going to drive, your people in your teams are giving credible answers, which keeps people's confidence high. Okay. Now, project plans only need to be detailed enough to hold things together. The minute you go too detailed as a group, you're wasting too much time in conversations about parts of the plan that people aren't interested in, but yet you're forcing them to sit through the whole thing. So, keep it at a high level to a certain level, and then break it, and then provide your project leaders direction as to how to get to the details that way. So you're more like an orchestra conductor. You're pulling it all together to make good music at the end. Okay, and remember Eisenhower's saying, plans are worthless or useless, but planning is indispensable because of what it drives. Now, everything I said about people before, but I want to share with you this one, is that you really have to monitor your people and the projects. And in fact, each project there should have a name next to it, etc. And actually, you could pay a bonus to this and so forth. But the key thing I found in driving changes, and if you have various projects that are linked, is that you have to measure people on the milestones and the pace towards completing that. Because whenever you don't manage pace, pace will manage you, and it'll just get out of control. So when I used to lead some projects in the corporate world towards the end, I used to actually pay people a bonus based on whether they hit each of the milestones and they delivered the project on time. So if they missed a few milestones, they got paid less of a bonus, because different projects are linked. Because when someone is late, it could force another team to get late on what they want to do. So if I would say, whatever you do when you're driving changes, you make very, very visible the milestones that need to be hit. And for sure, you put someone's name next to it, right? Because people really take ownership when their name is visible to others. So keep everyone focused from the start, and not just focus on delivery, but delivery on the pace. And the most powerful way to do this is ask your project leaders for the milestones to monitor towards them. Then your job is not to come up with the milestones. Your job is to make sure that the milestones across the projects are linked and they're in sync that way. Okay? So key thing here, have a who, have the projects and the pace and the results, the milestones and the achievement, and make it as visible as you can. Because when you make this visible, you're going to get peer pressure. People don't want to look bad. And you're going to create a sense of urgency on these things. And if you really want to supercharge it, put people's bonus tied to this as a project leader, and they'll really take it even more seriously. Money is an amplifier. So if they're already motivated and using their potential and everything, money will just amplify that in terms of going forward. Okay. So last thing is around the relationships, and it's around playing the politics. And I'll share a few things here, and because I still want to leave some time at the end for questions and answers, so forth. Think about it. Did Noah start building the ark before it started raining or after it started raining? Yeah, for sure. He started building it before. Now, if you're going to have any issues, you need to build your relationships before you need it. If you haven't built the relationships in driving change, and you show up at someone's door or you get on the Zoom call with them and so forth, the first thing they're thinking is, what does this person want? And you can't afford to do that because they put the walls up, right? And so the key I found is you're building relationships. One boss said to me one time in my career, he says, the first thing you do whenever you take on a new project or whenever you take on a new assignment or a new job is make a list of all the people who have some impact on your decision making, and make that list and start building a relationship from the first day, because there'll be at a time when you'll need something from them. And if you don't know what's important to the other person, you don't know how to package what you want inside what they want. So it's so important that way. And in fact, the most valuable list that I maintain was that key relationships list when I was leading the major projects, because all I had to do was scan the list every week and just say, how am I doing? How warm is that relationship? Is there something more I need to do to make that relationship stronger so that it's there when I need it? And think about it this way. You need to be in the game to influence the game. So if you don't like politics, you are not providing your people doing the change any air cover. So, politics is basically driving alignment. And when you don't drive alignment, you lose speed. So I found that the best thing about this one is to think about it in terms of building the relationships that enable the alignment, but also they enable the difficult conversation when you need to have it, because you have a foundation of understanding what's important to other people and you know how to talk to them. Okay, so remember, Noah did not build the ark after it started raining. He built it before it started raining. Okay, so relationships are powerful. Now, very interesting is in your change management strategy, particularly on relationships and stakeholders. Okay, when I ask people the sequence of this, they often give me a different sequence. So they say, I go, who do you talk to first? And they'd say, well, we talk to the negative. Or sometimes they say, I talk to the positive. And then who will you talk to second? And then sometimes they say, well, I'll go to the negative or the positive. Or, to the neutral, because I want to move the neutral, I should say. So what I found is the most successful influencers start by talking to the positive. They strengthen the support. They understand very clearly why they're getting that support. And they're looking for those people to support them as they go through the change. Now, oftentimes people say the next people I talk to are the neutrals, but that's not really a good way to do it, because neutrals by definition have no energy. Okay. Let me ask you a quick question. Which is easier to influence? Someone with no energy at all or someone with negative energy on it? Which one do you think is easier to influence? Someone with no energy or negative energy? One says no energy, others say negative. It's a mixture. I found it's easier to influence the one with negative because they have an energy about the topic. You can just switch their view of it and they'll redirect their energy. People with no energy, you have to create the energy in the topic before you can actually get them to influence. And so if I ask you this, which is easier, to create energy in someone or to redirect energy? What do you think? Create it or redirect it? Yeah, it's redirected. Okay. So the neutrals should be the last people you talk to. Okay. So talk to your positives, get them strong, then talk to your negatives. Okay. And here's a quick question for you. You're negative. Let's say you're negative on a project and the project leader avoids you all the time. You're a stakeholder and everything, but they never talk to you and you're super negative. How do you feel if they never ever talk to you? Scared, fear, what else? If they don't talk to you, how do you feel about that if they never talk to you? they're up to something, undervalued, you're not going to even support anything. In fact, when you get in a meeting, you're going to probably attack them. You know, you're going to attack them. So way you always have to talk to the negatives, because you need to know why they're negative, because they could come and attack you at any time. And you need to be able to control them in meeting and understand where they're coming from. Now, the neutrals, by definition, have no energy. So the neutrals will go to wherever the dominant energy is. You know, I don't know if you've heard, there was a boutique hotel business. I think it was Chip Connolly who created it and then sold it. And he became, I think, the marketing manager for Airbnb. And when he had these boutique hotels, he looked at one set of numbers in hotels. And it was kind of interesting. It relates to this. He looked at the number of good people, the number of average people, and the number of poor people. If the number of good people was greater than the number of poor people, the culture was going in the right direction. If the number of poor people was greater than the good people, the culture was going in the negative direction. Because the average people, they just slide to the dominant, wherever the dominant culture is moving. So that's what I say is that too many change people spend too much time on the neutrals. The neutrals will gravitate to the dominant energy. So if you strengthen the positive, weaken the negative, the neutrals will join the positives. So I found that it's always good to work first on positives, keep them strong, work on the negatives so they're not going to attack you at the absolute wrong time. Okay. Now, the other thing is what we covered when we were influencing, when we did the Magnifying Your Influence seminar, is gain people support. In other words, ask for input. If you ask for input into the change, people have a tendency, because it's human nature, for us to support the whole change because we want our part, our input, to be successful. So the more you ask for input from people, the more you show you use it, the more they're going to help you support that way. So when you're talking to the positives, you ask for more and more input so that they're even more positive to support you. When you're talking to the negatives, you're always asking them for input. You're asking them for advice. You're asking them for what could be done. Because if you use some of that input, even in a change that they're not agreeing with, they have a tendency to support their idea because they want to see it successful. You know, I said before on the other masterclass, great saying that I heard from the one guy who was always searching for money. He says, if you ask for money, you get advice. If you ask for advice, you get money, right? So if you ask for support, you're not going to get it. But if you ask for input, you often will get the support that way. So believe me, you have to invest in conversations, and your power here is asking those right questions. Okay. Now, one last thing, then we'll open up for questions, is to cover the 6 P's of influencing in meetings. If you're going to drive change, you better know how to handle meetings, and you better stay in control of those meetings, because they could easily get out of control, because you need to be able to learn how to manage the personalities coming in. You're like an orchestra conductor making good music. But here's what I found, particularly driving meetings with the change. And so I found that there's 6 P's. Now, the first P is preparation. Because if you're not prepared going into a meeting, you're not in the driver's seat of the meeting. So you got to do your preparation. Everybody says, you know, I'm so good at this, I can wing it. No. Preparation puts you so much knowledgeable so that you react or you respond much better in the moment. So you got to do your preparation, you know, where you're going to get trouble from, who do you need support, what are you going to cover, what's the outcomes you want, et cetera, et cetera. Second P is performance. You got to show the energy behind things, because if they don't see your energy behind it, they don't get the energy either. You know, you create the energy, particularly in a Zoom call. You create the energy that people will either pay attention or start doing their emails and things. So it's how you bring that energy and performance. And you're not always going to be, in great shape every day, but you've got to put the energy forward. The third thing is you're going to have to paraphrase, because everybody uses different words, different ways to express themselves. And your goal is to get everybody understanding the similar way. So often you have to paraphrase what people are saying so that it becomes more meaningful to everybody in the meeting. The next P is prompting. You're going to have to prompt some people to speak, because, the introverts won't say anything, but they kind of have a good idea sometimes. Or if a person doesn't say anything in the meetings, they're not really committed to things coming out of the meeting because they haven't contributed. So you need to prompt some people. Here's a tip. Prompt them to speak in the first half of the meeting, because you want to get them involved as soon as possible. Often people would say, they go around room at the end and say, oh, such and such didn't contribute. What do you think here? What do you think here? Prompt the introverts early in the meeting, and then your extroverts will come in anytime anyway. So, keep that in mind. And you need to preempt. You can't let the problem explainers control your meeting. The biggest problem you have in change is you have people who just love explaining the problem, not solving the problem. And if you allow them to be negative or to just take it in the wrong way, you've got to preempt them. They're the negative people that we saw on the other slide. So what you do is you go visit them and you listen for 10, 20 minutes about their issue. And you really understand what they're really negative about. And then when they start to speak up in a meeting, you preempt them and say, oh, no, John, didn't we have this conversation the other day? I think your issue is this. You will say it in a very neutral way. You won't destroy the meeting, and they feel that their issue has been heard. But if you preempt them without speaking to them beforehand, that's very rude, because you didn't invest the time. So, this is one of the most critical P's when you drive any complex change, is how to deal with the problem explainers in your meetings. And the only way you can do it effectively is if you visit them before the meeting, or you call them up before the meeting and you listen to their issue. Okay? If their issue has been listened to, they're going to help you. And then the last one is position. Okay? Position is it's kind of a little difficult on virtual calls now, because but if you're in a meeting and you're around the table, or you're facilitating the meeting from different positions, where you position yourself is critical to drive the right conversation. If you're directing the conversation, right, you want to be out there in front. If you're wanting the conversation to go without you, move to the side of the room. Don't look like you're controlling the conversation, and let it flow. If you really want to take someone out of the conversation, if it's a circle table, go and stand behind them just for a few seconds. Because when you stand behind someone, they can't participate because they have to look up like this and so forth. Or if there's a U shape or others, just go and stand in front of them for just a few seconds. Psychologically, you take them out of the conversation and you control it. So where you position yourself is absolutely key. Now, let's say that, you're not leading you don't want to be strong in leading it, but you want to, let's say you're in a negotiation format, or you're just trying to facilitate a very good meeting. And you have a rectangular table. Okay. Where should you sit? Should you sit at the top of the table? Should you sit at the middle of the table? Where should you sit if you want to have the most control without perceived as trying to control the meeting? Top of the table or middle of the table? Yep, you're middle of the table. But here's the trick. You want to be in the middle of the table, one seat, other side of the middle seat, exact middle. Because if you're in the exact middle, psychologically, subconsciously, they'll think you're controlling it. So you want to sit one seat either side of the middle. That's the most powerful there. So remember these 6 P's. It's unbelievably important. The more complex, the more conflict you have in the project, you have to remember the P, preempt. Listen to your negative people, preempt them in the meeting, explain their issue in a neutral way, and you don't destroy the flow of your meeting, okay? So those are the keys of what we talked about. Let me just go back to the first here, the 3 Ps. It's so important, guys, just to reinforce. Your best people signals you're seriously. Creating the plans, it helps you think it through so that you can explain it, and you keep people's confidence in you if you can answer good questions. And you always need to manage the relationships and the stakeholders. You've got to be in the game to, you know, to really control the game. Okay. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how was this for you today? Did you pick up some ideas on driving change, some things that you can incorporate into your own role? What do you think? Good. So at least 8 and above. Very good. Very good. Now, I'll open it up. Can I answer any questions that we have? We have a few minutes left, but also I can stay on if you like. So you can, if you want, you can just unmute yourself and come on the screen, or you can come through the chat function. Any questions? Okay, let me see. Let's see. I think everybody should be able to mute. Yeah, unmute. Okay. Yep. Any questions, comments? Elaborate a bit.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
Jimmy here. I do have one question
Sure.
from my side. I read one book. I don't remember exactly the name of the book. It says to think or to organize everything based on 6 different hats. So, for example, when you're wearing white hats, you're only talking about facts.
Yep.
When you're wearing blue, red hats, you're only expressing your emotions.
Yep.
What's your idea of applying this kind of concept in a meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to adapt to people's personalities, right? If you think about there's 4 personalities, and you might have seen a breakdown of 6 and everything. So you need to adapt. Some people want more facts. Some people are looking at the emotional side. Some people just want it very short and simple. The best way I found to influence people is to use an example. And then you add the details, facts or emotion, with the way you tell the story or the example. So I found that the example is powerful because you want your influence to go beyond the meeting to after the meeting. An example or a story is memorable and it can be passed on. A long explanation will be forgotten and it won't be used. So what I tend to do is I adapt through the use of examples or stories, and then I add things around it. Okay.
Okay. My last question is about the word politics, because English is not my native language.
Yeah.
So when I started, so my first initial instinct is politics. Well, that's a negative word. Someone is trying to take advantage of everyone else. So this is my initial understanding. But I suppose I can replace word with the communication or relationship maintenance. These words is more neutral.
It's really alignment, you know, and you have people that are influencers, you have people that are manipulators, right? But you have to be able to influence the manipulators too, and everything. And it's about building strong relationships that keep a good alignment for the project to move forward. And so look at it another way. You need to give your people air cover. You're asking them to do things below, but you need to keep the alignment of the support above. So it's building strong relationships and aligning priorities and focuses so that you can keep moving forward. Okay? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. There's one question here. Any tips on the way to answer people from the options? Yeah, the answer people will always, if you're recruiting them, you give them scenarios and you see how they describe what they would do. And the answer people will get very, very specific. And the best way to uncover options people is to ask for assumptions, because you know the answer people, A people will have very basic assumptions. The options people will have more involved assumptions, which means they're looking at the problem not in black and white, but they're looking at the problem in all the colors. So they tend to be able to describe their assumptions in a much better way. That's what I found. Okay, we'll take one more question. Anybody have a last question? No? Okay, so thanks a lot, guys. I'm going to put this recording up, and then I'll also send to you the slide deck and so forth. What I would do is I would make a print of that 6 Ps, because the 6 Ps of really driving meetings is so critical when you're driving change. And particularly if you remember the one I said, which was preempt. Okay? So wish you guys to have a very successful week, and take care now. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.